Hello there once again, fellow peregrinos. Welcome back to episode 19 of El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning and preparation and packing for walking El Camino de Santiago, the road to Santiago, as well as tips, tricks and hacks to make your journey along the way a lot more enjoyable. Our aim is to put more K's in your days, take the grim out of the pilgrimage and put more bounce in your boots. To that end, today I am going to divulge the details of my winter kit list for walking the Camino Portuguese. My wife Rachel and I have just come back from walking from Valencia inside the Portuguese border to Santiago de Compostela, and we passed by Tui and went all the way through Galicia via lovely places like Caldas de Reis. We passed by Pontevedra, Porriño, loads of lovely places, Padrón, and I thought it would be very useful for anyone that's planning to walk their Camino sometime sooner or later to have this packing list. This is a very, very, very minimalized packing list, okay? So just basically the bare minimum to survive. Now, Rachel Smith, in one of our previous episodes, if I'm not mistaken, it was episode 16, she dropped a lovely Camino carry-out, and she said pack the least amount of things you need to be comfortable. So this is the least amount of things I felt I would need to be comfortable, and I am going to give you the weight of my backpack at the end of the episode so we can see if it does fall in with that 10% of our body weight guideline, and I'll tell you how it felt for me as well. So how is it for you, baby? I'll let you know. So on to that packing list, that kit list. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to expect you to make notes, stop while you're walking the dog, or dry your hands while you're doing the washing up, or pull the car over by the side of the road. If you do want this packing list, this kit list in full detail, all you need to do is send me an email, pilgrimspodcast@outlook.com. That's pilgrimspodcast@outlook.com. If you send me an email, say, Brad, can you please send me that kit list that you were divulging and talking about? I'll send this to you, no problem, okay? So here's the drum roll. Sorry if I sound a little bit lively, but I've got that post-Camino buzz. You know, every time I go and do the Camino, I do have a thought to myself, and I think, is it time to close this chapter of my life? Should I move on? The Camino has been a part of my life for about 15 years now, 14 years, I think, and I always wonder if it's time to kind of move on, find something else to be enthusiastic about, another healthy addiction. But you know what? After coming back from these 6 days on the Camino Portuguese, repeating these 6 days on the Camino Portuguese, I love it more than ever. And it's because of the pilgrims and the people that I met along the way. And of course, holding hands with nature. It was the walking by the riverside and passing by waterfalls and just being outdoors non-stop, turning my phone off for a week. It's a beautiful experience. It's empowering, it's enriching, it makes you feel clearer and healthier and better about life and your place in it. That's what a Camino does for me anyway, and I'm more in love with it than ever. So, talking of loving the Camino, let's get to that kit list while I stop waffling on. Okay, so this is a winter packing list, okay? Now, there are only going to be 3 things from this kit list that I would discard if it was going to be a summer or spring, and maybe it could work every single item for the autumn as well, but I'll tell you those 3 things that I would discard as well. So you're going to get the weight of my backpack at the end for this kit list, and you're going to be told the 3 things that I wouldn't take with me if I were to walk in the summer. So the only 3 minor changes I would walk if it was walking in the summer. Okay, so here goes. So the first one, the obvious one, is sleeping bag. Now, I have a very light sleeping bag, a thin sleeping bag. Why? Because if it does get cold at night, I can put on my hat, I can put on my gloves, and I can put on my snood, and I can put on my warm jumper as well, my hoodie. So I have to admit, there were some albergues in Portugal where they didn't have any heating, and I laid in bed at night in my sleeping bag wearing every single item of clothing I had, as well as a couple of blankets. That sufficed. So I just got away with that one. Some of you might want to take a bit of a thicker sleeping bag, but I always take a thin sleeping bag. Why? Because of space and weight, and because I've always got away with it. And until I stop getting away with it, that's what I'm going to do. So thin sleeping bag with one of the little hoods as well, because you do find in some of the albergues that you might not like the material of some of the kind of lino pillows. They can be a bit rough sometimes as well. So I think that's a good idea. A thin sleeping bag with a hood, okay? So you can lay that on the pillows that you use. On the contrary, there were some albergues in Galicia, public ones especially, which you'd think would be saving on the heating, but in actual fact, they had the heating turned up to 10. And in the end, I had to sleep naked inside my sleeping bag. Please don't have nightmares about that. But it was so hot in the dorms that, yes, I actually had to take off all of my clothing, and the thin sleeping bag was probably surplus to requirements, but obviously I kept it on because I didn't want to scare people. So, thin sleeping bag has sufficed. Okay. Next item is a waterproof cover for my rucksack. Okay, so that always stays in one of the side pockets, so if it does start to rain, I can deploy it immediately. There's a poncho that goes in one of the other side pockets. For obvious reasons, if it rains, it's easy access, you put that on immediately. Did I use it this time? Yes, I did. A warm hoodie, okay? So, if it does get cold in the mornings, which in winter it always does, I remember looking at the temperature gauge, which is often displayed outside pharmacies, and more often than not, it was always around 0 at first light. Frost on the ground, so you've got to be very careful as well not to slip over. It was very icy some days. Okay, so a warm hoodie is definitely necessary. And would I take that in summer? Yes, because it can get very cold in the mountains and at altitude. So a warm hoodie any time of the year is an absolute necessity, in my opinion. I also took a wind cheetah anorak with a fleece lining, so it keeps you warm on the inside and it's not too heavy to carry with you as well. And again, that combined with my hoodie, that combined with my gloves, my scarf, and sorry, should I say my snood, not my scarf. I didn't take a scarf, I took a snood, and my woolly hats, that kept me warm in the morning. Okay, so I had a pair of trousers to wear off Camino. Now, these trousers, I know we like to talk material, so they weren't jeans, but they weren't quick drying material as well. They were a mixture of both materials. So now, if I wanted to make my backpack lighter, I would take some quick drying polyester on nylon trousers, but this was a comfort thing for me. I like to feel comfortable when I get out of my walking gear for the day. Okay, so a pair of trousers to wear off Camino. A pair of zip-off pants, should I say, a pair of zip-off pants to wear on the Camino. So, obviously in the morning when it's cold, you've got the trousers on. When it does get warm in the afternoon, when the sun rises, it can get up to about 15, 16 degrees in the wintertime, even at that time of year. And I would often zip off at the knees, so just to give my legs a bit of air and cool down, especially sometimes when you've climbed and you get to the top of a mini climb and you're very, very, very hot. So, zip-off trousers, which I'll wear on Camino. When I'm done walking for the day, I would give those a rinse in the sink and hang those out. Most of the time, they dry and are ready for the morning. If I didn't see a place or an opportunity to get them dry, I would just air them. Sometimes I didn't have an opportunity to clean them, so I would give them an airing. So still hang them up and give them some air. 3 pairs of socks, and I had 2 pairs of hiking socks and 1 pair of normal socks. The normal socks I never cleaned and I kept for wearing when I finished walking at the end of the day, when I'm sightseeing around town and when I'm in the albergues. And I would also be wearing one of those pairs of hiking socks, and the other pair would either be drying on my rucksack with two safety pins that I took with me as I walked, or they would be hanging up in the drying area of the albergue. Or, I must admit, this time, me and my wife, we did stay in a few private hotels because I got some really bad sleep the first couple of nights in the albergue. And that was more than anything due to how hot the dorms were. They pumped up the heating. I just couldn't get to sleep. So I was probably getting about 4 hours the first couple of nights we stayed in albergues. And I said to my wife, right, I need to sleep well tonight. I need to be in a good mood. I want to enjoy this. And so we did, I must admit, for a couple of nights, stay in a few hotels for some very, very economical prices as well. But that's potentially an issue for another podcast, whether we stay in albergues or whether we stay in hotels. And we can explore the pros and cons of those as well. Anyway, sticking to the kit list topic. So, like I said, 2 pairs of hiking socks, 1 pair you're wearing, 1 pair you've washed and are hanging up or are drying in the drying area or on your backpack while you walk. My socks that I always washed at the end of the day were always ready to wear when I needed them the next time. Okay, so wash them straight away as soon as you get to the albergues. Rinse them in the hand washing area and put them up straight away so you maximize the amount of time they get to dry so you can put them on when you need them next. All right, so where were we? 3 t-shirts. I had 1 nylon, or should I say polyester quick drying t-shirt. I had 1 cotton t-shirt, mainly because it's like my lucky t-shirt. It's my New York triathlon t-shirt and I like to take it everywhere. And this is confession time. I took a mixture of polyester and nylon t-shirt with me of my favourite football team, as you'd say in America, soccer team. And that favourite team, please don't hate me for this, is West Ham United. We're doing very bad at the moment, but I'm a loyal supporter and I took it with me and I'll always wear that badge on my heart. So I had 3 t-shirts with me. So 1 that I would wear on Camino, 1 that would always be drying, and 1 that I would wear off Camino, and that was my 1 off Camino t-shirt, which was my West Ham shirt. Okay, please don't hate me for that. Let's move on to toiletries. So only 3 t-shirts, and we're really talking 3 of everything. So 3 pairs of socks, 3 t-shirts, and you'll also discover later that I took 3 pairs of boxer shorts as well, with the same philosophy, okay, which is you wear 1 pair, you have 1 pair that's always clean and 1 pair that's always drying. So 3 of all of those. Toiletries, before I went off on that tangent. Toothpaste, 75 millimeters, 75 mils. A roll-on deodorants. I used mine. Some of my fellow pilgrims this time in the albergues didn't use theirs. Please, guys, have a shower when you get there. There were some very, very, very smelly people in the albergues. Now, I know we walk far every day, and I know that it's a hazard of the road that we are going to sometimes challenge our fellow peregrinos' nostrils, but as a bare minimum, just have a shower. 2 guys, they arrived there and they didn't have a shower, and they've really smelled. And I laid in bed at night using my blindfold across my nose. No word of a lie. So be conscious of your hygiene, please, and yes, have a shower when you get there. Everyone will love you. Anyway, we're talking about rolling deodorants. I had some moisturizer for my face when I finished, as recommended by my lovely wife. I had sun cream, and this was a 36 ml sun cream, SPF factor 50. Rubbed that on my face during the morning before I went walking. Now, this little beauty saved my life. A 50 ml tub of Vaseline. Now, on all of my previous Caminos, I had always suffered with blisters. This time I didn't. I followed the advice of our amazing guests on the podcast so far. And in all honesty, I knew this anyway, but I'm so eager to get on the road in the mornings. In previous Caminos, I didn't do it just because I was so eager and keen to get on the road. This time I took my time, and I would take a good 5-10 minutes rubbing Vaseline over all those problem areas where I know I get them, on my heels, on the balls of my feet, between my toes. And I'm happy to report I did not have one single hot spot or blister. That was a first for me. So the Vaseline, guys, take the Vaseline with you, a small tub, rub it on your feet before you go walkies every day. It works for me. It's worked for many pilgrims, past and present as well, and I'm sure it'll work for you guys in the future. Okay, now my wife and I took very small measurement of each one, very small packets. We took mini sun cream, mini toothpaste, mini Vaseline, because you can buy the stuff along the way as and when you need it in the pharmacies, in the chemists. You'll see those big flashing green signs when you get to the towns and villages and cities, and that is where you can refill on the supplies. So that saves you carrying extra weight on your back when you don't need it. So take minis of your toiletries, okay? That's what I did, worked for me. I had sunglasses for obvious reasons. I had a quick drying travel towel, always dried in the morning when I went to pick up my stuff from the drying area, and stuck it in my rucksack. As aforementioned, I had a woolly hat, I had gloves, and I had a snood. Absolutely imperative for keeping warm in the cold mornings in the winter. As I mentioned before, 3 pairs of boxer shorts. You're wearing one is clean and ready to put on when you get to the albergue, and the other is drying on your rucksack or drying and clean already in your backpack. All right. I also took John Brierley's Camino Portuguese guidebook. Okay, so if you haven't seen that before, we could say that John Brierley's guidebooks are arguably the most popular amongst pilgrims. I think his guidebooks are superb. I only have one little thing I'd like to see, and I'd like to see more white space between the text, because sometimes I find it hard, pulling out the vital information from the body of text in the book, and because the text is very small. And maybe I'd like to have his guidebook a bit smaller so it fits in my pocket. But anyway, John Brierley's guidebooks are brilliant, and that's the only thing, my only reservation with them. Apart from that, I think they are amazing, and I would highly recommend them as well. I took a notebook and pen to keep a journal along the way. I took a dictaphone with me so I can speak what I'm seeing, hearing, feeling as I walk, because I like to write books about the Camino and I like to record every detail as I go along the way. Now, why, you ask, don't I have this function or application on my mobile phone? I don't have my mobile phone switched on while I walk. This is an opportunity for me on the Camino to absolutely disconnect from modern life and all of the information overload. I like to have a digital detox. I turn off my phone. Now, you might be asking, some of you, well, how do you take pictures? I'm lucky that my wife Rachel walks with me, and she takes photos of pretty much everything. She is an absolute photo addict, and she doesn't miss a trick. So I'm quite lucky that I have Rachel on my team as a photographer, and I'll often point to her and say, Rach, take a picture of that. Oh, wow, look at that. And it'll be vice versa. All right, so I don't carry a camera with me. Rachel does all the photos, so I have the dictaphone in my pocket. I do have a mobile phone with me. I did carry my iPhone, but it was switched off, fully charged in case I needed it in an emergency. Now, I did turn it on at one point, and that was on my birthday. We were on the Camino on my birthday, and I just did turn it on when I'd finished walking for the day to call my mum, call my dad, and reply to messages from family and friends, because I didn't want to be rude and think people I was ignoring people. All right, so my mobile was in my kit list, but switched off. I also had with me earplugs and an eye mask. I had earphones with me, a very light pair of earphones, basically the ones that you get with your iPhone. Never used them the whole time on the Camino, but I did use them on the plane on the way there and on the way back. I had a 1 litre water bladder, and I will tell you my weight at the end of the episode with the water bladder full and without the water bladder full. I also carried with me my Fitbit because I'm a bit of a sadist and I like to know how far I've walked and how many calories I've burned and how many steps I've made by the end of the day. And even though, according to the Camino, we would have walked around about 115k from Valencia to Santiago on the Camino Portuguese with sightseeing, on walking around town. My wife and I actually did 191 kilometres in 6 days. That's with sightseeing on top of that. So just a bit of useless facts for you there. And we will move on to the other little things that I had in my kit list. And they were 4 pegs, which I used to peg my clothes onto the lines in the drying areas in the albergues, and 2 safety pins which I used to put on my backpack and dry as I walked. My socks always dried, my underwear always dried, and I'm laughing because I'm remembering last Friday the 6th, and Rachel and I walked into a restaurant in Padron. And I'm ashamed to say this, and I won't ever do it again, but it was an honest mistake. I walked into a packed restaurant with my socks and my underwear swinging on my backpack, I'm ashamed to say. So please learn your lesson from me. Before you go into a restaurant, unpeg them and stick them inside, okay? Because I felt very embarrassed and I felt like I was giving pilgrims a bad name by doing that. Of course, we are lovely people. We are friends of the earth, pilgrims. We recycle, we walk with Mother Nature, we love to be in contact with nature, and so we want people to think good of us, and I felt very, very bad about doing that, and as soon as I realised I'd done it, I kind of bashfully stuck them in my backpack. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, fellow shellmates, that is everything on my kit list. So, what were the 3 things I can hear you asking that I would discard from that kit list if I were to walk in summer or spring? So I would discard, quite stating the obvious here, the woolly hats, the gloves and the snood. Those are the only things I would discard. Those are the only changes I would make. I would still carry the rest of it. In autumn, many pilgrims report that it can be cold, and I guess especially if you're starting your day at altitude where it's always a lot colder, that you probably still would want to take the woolly hat, the gloves and the snood. I've walked the Camino in the summer and I've only walked it in winter, okay, and I never needed a woolly hat, gloves or a snood in the summertime. In the winter, every single morning without fail, and on the odd occasion in the albergues, in the public albergues when it was cold. Now, how heavy was your backpack? I hear you ask. Next question on your lips. So, here are those vital statistics, and we shall answer that all-important question. Did my backpack fall within the 10% of your body weight guideline? And how did it feel? Now, I tried my best to get within the 10% guideline, and here is the big moment, fellow shellmates. So, I'd made 2 measurements with my backpack. The first was what my backpack would weigh in the morning when I wouldn't have my warm jumper, I wouldn't have my woolly hat, my gloves or my snood. And I'm pleased to say my backpack only weighed 6 kilometres with a full 1 litre water bladder. 6 kilometres, I just said there. It didn't weigh 6 kilometres, it weighed 6 kilograms. 6 kilograms! That is way below the 7.8 kilograms, which would be 10% of my body weight. Now, let's imagine it's 11, 12 o'clock in the afternoon and I've just climbed up a big incline and I'm hot and my head is steaming. I take off my woolly hat, tear off the woolly gloves and take the snood from around my neck and pull off my hoodie, my warm hoodie. I put those in my bag and I've still got a full water bladder because I've filled up along the way. It's coming in at 7.5 kilograms. So on both counts, it did fall within my body weight. Now, the only time I really carried anything more than that was when I would have a few snacks, and I never ever carried more than a handful of muesli bars, a couple of sandwiches, and a banana. That's pretty much all I would carry with me between towns, because more often than not, there's enough places along the way to stop and get a few snacks and replenish and re-energize along the way. So plan out your day. If you know you're going to have long distances between stops, between towns and villages and cities where you know you're going to be able to do that to re-energize, then you might want to carry a bit more than that. But never really needed to carry anything more than that, so I don't imagine that it would have. I didn't have the chance to weigh my bag along the way when I did have the snacks in, but I don't think my bag weighed any more than 7.8 kilograms at any time, which is 10% and a bit less of my overall body weight. So it did fall within that guideline, so I was able to achieve that. And as Rachel Smith says in episode 16, packing the least amount of things you need to be comfortable. I was comfortable with all of these things. I always had clean clothes to put on at the end of the day. I always had clean hiking socks, which we say is very important for preventing blisters, because the dirt and the grime and the grit can be a cause of the blisters. All right. How did that feel, everyone? How did it feel to be carrying that amount of stuff, and how did it feel on my back? Now, I can honestly say in previous Caminos, when I would take a break, I would groan with relief when I dropped my rucksack off my shoulders. This time, I didn't groan with relief. I felt comfortable. I felt good. I wasn't longing to get it off my back at any point along the way. So, would I recommend trying to get it within 10% of your body weight? Absolutely, I would. 100%. So, maybe do a little bit of, like we've always said, you need to do a bit of trial and error along the way. You need to test out if it's going to work for you. You need to do a good few hours with your Camino backpack ready on your back to make sure that when you start walking, you've already tried and tested. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, fellow peregrinos, that's it for this week's episode. Sorry, the caffeine is always making my mouth go faster than my brain. The next episode will be on Friday the 20th. Okay, so look out for that one. Until next Friday, fellow peregrinos, Buen Camino!
Wanderer, a life adventurer, said he's a secret philosopher. He's a wandering wanderer,